This is a part of the exhibit at the museum that we both worked upon. And as I am not a Texas historian, we are going to kind of tag team this for questions and working on this together. The day's lecture is part of the series called Glimpse into the Museum. And today we will talk about the persecution of the Karankawas in Texas, which is part of our 10 Stages of Genocide gallery in our permanent exhibition. First of all, I want to give a big thank you to Bank of Texas for sponsoring this series and bringing this to you and allowing us the opportunity to give little parts of the exhibits and reach the public still that way in this very unique time. I also want to give you a heads up that next week we will do a discussion on Rise of Nazism, and we will actually be viewing one of our films from the exhibition and having a discussion on it. So it's another unique way to get a glimpse into the museum while we physically cannot go there at this time. So with that, I want to get started. I do want to say the session is recorded today, but it will be just my face and my slides recorded. If you want to participate in the discussion, or if you have any questions as we're going along, we do have a Q&A button. The Q&A button should be on the bottom of your screen, and there you can ask your questions. This is a webinar platform. We won't be able to go back and forth, but only through the Q&A button. So again, you can pose your questions in there. I do ask if you, since they are typed questions, if you can make them as direct as possible. It makes it easier and quicker to read and respond back to you. And I will try to absorb them as much into my lecture as they come through and read them. I have my Q&A screen open in front of them. Okay, let's get started. So as I mentioned earlier, look at the persecution of the Karankawas in Texas is part of our 10 Stages of Genocide gallery. The 10 Stages of Genocide were developed by Dr. Gregory Stanton from George Mason University as a way to analyze the process of genocide so that we can be more aware of how genocide evolves and when it is occurring in an area. And the stage of persecution in this gallery is highlighted by the genocide of the Karankawas in Texas. And so that's what we will be talking about. So rather than talking about the whole gallery, which was one of our first virtual glimpses into the museum, we will today be focusing on one specific island. But here you can get a little glimpse and you can see those 10 stages laid out in our 10 stages gallery. And each one is paired, each one of these stages is paired with a genocide. So you can see Guatemala and Cambodia and Bosnia right here. So the other part that is unique is that each one of these islands in the exhibition have very different ways of interpreting the stage and the genocide. This is the island on the Karankawas. And it is very unique. On one side, it shows the perspective of the genocide from the Karankawas, and you can see it on the right-hand side here with the tall grass and the canoe and the different elements and the flags, and the map here shows the different tribes and nations in Texas. And on the other side, it shows the perspective of the genocide from the settler side. In this case, we were going to look at the Austin colony, and we were going to look at, it looks from their perspective. So you can see the settlers' cabin. You can see some of the documents here that are on the island referring to the establishment of the Austin colony and of the Austin settlement. So sorry, I apologize about that. I just wanted to show that to you so you can kind of have a little bit of a glimpse into the exhibition of how it's portrayed here. The other way that it is portrayed at the this genocide is explained at the museum, besides this island, is a graphic novel. And I wanted to, I'm gonna unshare really quick here, and I wanna pull it up. So each one of the 10 genocides that is used as an example in this gallery comes with a graphic novel that explains the gallery. And this is the online version of that graphic novel. It is for the persecution of the Karankawa Indians of Texas. It is called Our Land. Each one has a unique title and it is uniquely created to be in the exhibit. And I'll just kind of flip really briefly to it. I'm going to take parts of it and put it in my presentation today too, but I wanted to just see it together here, and I'll show you at the end of the presentation where you can actually find them. So you can see it fully narrates the event as well. This took quite a bit of time to create each one of these graphic novels because in a lot of cases there was not information about the genocides that we discussed in the exhibit. So teams of historians, graphic novel designers and artists, and then storytellers had to be combined to create these graphic novels. So this was quite an endeavor and is a really unique way for us to be able to kind of narrate and bring the story of this genocide to the public. So I wanted to start off, so you had a little bit of an idea of how we address this genocide within the 10 stages of Genocide Gallery. And now what I want to do to you is kind of go through the history and take a little bit of a deep dive into that. So I hope y'all are ready for that. So the Karankawas is actually a group of smaller populations along the Texas Gulf Coast. They are the Cocos, Cohanis, Copanes, and Karankawas, and together these bands really form what is known as the Karankawas, which is an American Indian tribe that lives in Texas. They are not the only ones. They are surrounded by other tribes in that area, including the Tonkawa, the Lipan Apache, and other tribes in Texas. But this one, as you can see on the map here, reaches about from the Galveston Island and the Houston area, if you're not from Texas, going down the kind of Gulf Coast line of Texas here southwards. The Karankawas mainly lived on the coast. They would go inland a little bit seasonally. They would go inwards, but mainly they lived on that strip of land, and which is a really swampy, a lot of water, a lot of little riverways. If you visit this area, you're really familiar with it. Galveston is a very touristy area to still visit today, and that is kind of the area that they inhabited. They were known before European colonizers came. They were very well known, and other tribes described the Karankawas, and there was connection between the American Indian tribes in Texas. They were known as dog lovers. Actually, that's where we believe that the word Karankawa might have come from as well. The Tonkawa used the word wrestlers to describe them. The Lipan Apache refer to them as the people who walk into the water. And they were also seen by a lot of the other tribes as a Caribbean tribe because of their language. Their language roots were much more native to some of the American Indian tribes, or the native tribes from the Caribbean. And so that language pattern might show that at one point the Karankawas themselves came to this area from another area, most likely the Caribbean, because of their language patterns. So this just gives you a little bit of a glimpse. Of course, very little is known about the Karankawas. It is limited to the information that we have from European settlers and a little bit from those other tribes, as the Karankawas do not exist anymore today. So in the graphic novel, we really introduce who the Karankawas are, as most of our visitors have never heard of the Karankawas. This is unknown to them, so we wanted to introduce them to the public. And so here you can see a little bit of a clip from the R. Lane graphic novel, where it talks about, the Karankawas were born from the water on a clamshell canoe, a little bit of their traditions that we have learned about, that European settlers, colonizers have talked about and have shared that information about the Karankawas. And so you can see the importance of the water as they are coastal tribes. So, as I said, and I'm going a little bit into this narrative of who they were and what kind of their lifestyle is, because it is very important to understand that when we actually get to more the persecution side, that we have to understand their lifestyle, because otherwise some of the narrative that might come out will actually follow the pattern of dehumanization that you kind of frequently see in genocide. So their lifestyle is very much that they are based on the water. So fishing is very important. They are seasonally nomadic, and they have these kind of carved out canoes that they use. Even they live in these kind of like more straw structured tents. You can kind of see them in the background here, that they could pack up and move with them. And so they have also a little bit of hunter-gatherer kind of culture as well. Berries, a little bit hunting deer, but their main substance is going to be fish, oysters, turtle eggs, things that you would find on the coastline where they are living naturally, right? And keep this in mind, right? This will be very important in the narrative of this genocide. They did look distinctively different from other American Indian tribes in Texas. First of all, they were tall and muscular built. There's many descriptions of this. They wore deer skin or nothing at all when it came, especially to the children. They were very unique in that they had blue circle tattoos around their cheekbones, and horizontal blue line from the outer angle going from the eye towards the ear. So this kind of blue tattooing was very much a mark of the Karankawas. And then piercings, especially with some different types of fish bone and other types of bone, the lower lip and the nipple on each breast, so different types of piercings as well. And then the smearing of bodies with dirt and grease was very common to them as well. If you've been to that area, it is very swampy, lots of mosquitoes, so I can see that this was actually very beneficial as well. And white teeth. A lot of the colonizers, but also other tribes, will talk about the white teeth of the Karankawa. And they also had rituals of head flattening, which was not very common around other American Indian tribes in this area. So this was also a feature that was part of their culture that is very unique to the Karankawas here in Texas. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to add them. I don't know every answer, but I can maybe give little extra tidbits of information if I didn't address it yet. You're welcome to ask that. Remember the Q&A button. So here in the graphic novel, we talk about, living in harmony. The Karankawas, as their culture is really a fisherman culture, hunter-gatherer culture, nomadic, that the tie to the land is very important to them. So we portray, the canoe right here, the straw tent-like structures, their wigwam, as it was called, and you can see the fish being dried here. So again, we want to introduce that is how they lived and what their culture was. And Becky Wilson just had, what does head flattening mean? It is I actually learned about this from, strangely, my visits to the Riviera Maya, where the Mayans also perform head flattening. It's a structure where, in different way, wooden planks, different things were used to flatten either the forehead from a very young age on, or the back, and it more squares the head instead of our more natural rounded head. It is very much a cultural significant thing and parts. And that is actually more something that also comes more from Mayan culture and Caribbean culture. So that also is a point to the fact that the Karankawas very likely were themselves at some point settlers in that Galveston Gulf Coast area of Texas. We actually, Pam asked, when do we know that they first came to the coastal Texas area? We have no idea. We do not, that is, Pam, if you're interested in a field of research right there, they still don't know 100% when exactly they came. And we do, the things that point, like the head flattening, the linguistic tones of that is very distinctly different from other Texas tribes, really points that they are coming from a different area. And so we do know that at some point they were settlers, but we don't know when and when that influence came and if they mixed with other tribes at that point, but we don't know that. So I'm moving forward to the first contact with European settlers. In this case, it's actually going to be the Spanish. Spanish explorer, you can see him here, Cabeza de Vaca, actually in 1528, his ship and his crew actually crashed just off the coast in Galveston, and you can see it here on, so you can see his voyage right here, going around Cuba, going around Florida and following that coastline. And then you can see here, all of a sudden, de Vaca crew, him and his crew, deviate from the coast and go inland. That's because they crashed right here. The ship, there's a massive shipwreck. And in November 1528. And they wreck right there where the Karankawas, where their territory is. And they are taken in, actually, they are helped by the Karankawas, and de Vaca will be the first encounter. It is interesting enough is because those are also the first descriptions that Europeans will have, and some of the first written descriptions that we have of the Karankawas is from de Vaca, which were actually very friendly, and is if you hear his narrative, there is some awkward hostility in the beginning, but these two do work together, and then de Vaca and his crew continue their exploration and move forward. It is interesting because after this first contact, the Karankawas will not be visited again by European colonizers until a century and a half later. And so this first experience is good, but it is not going to remain that way. As we move forward in history, from all sides, eventually European colonizers are going to come. The Spanish are going to come from the south through Mexico, what is today Mexico, coming up into Texas. They will start establishing missions everywhere. And this is where confrontation with the Karankawas slowly starts happening, because there does become competition for resources. Resources are limited in coastal areas, especially when you move a little bit of inland. And friction starts happening. But the Spanish do set up some kind of trading partnership and some collaboration between the Karankawas and these settlements. These settlements are very important because eventually from the other side, from the New Orleans side, the French will start coming, and the French will also bring their colonizers and their settlers. In this case, a very famous settler or French explorer. The British really call him a pirate. The French call him an explorer. You can take whatever side you would like. But Pirate Lafitte will come from the other side and also will land in the Galveston Bay. Now, this encounter is not going to be so friendly. Of course, we only have the perspective from the French explorers, but they said that upon arrival, they were immediately attacked by the Karankawas. And the Karankawas, the skirmishes between those two, the attacks between those two continue. And this is for the first time when this contact is made that we see very different descriptions, very hostile descriptions, that the Karankawas are the enemy, that they're hostile, that they're a violent, like, population, violent tribe, that they are cannibals. This is the first descriptions we start getting, that the Karankawas are not fish eating, that they're not in a sense hunter-gatherers, but they're cannibals, and that is a major part of their cultural rituals. Up until this point, there has been the Waka who lived with them, different, no description. It comes when the French explorers comes. It's when we start getting these first descriptions of them being cannibals, and this immense friction. And that narrative kind of sticks. The Spanish, not so much in with the Spanish colonizers and settlers and the missions, but we'll see that this will come back when the Anglo-Protestant settlers will come to this area as well. So by 1722, the French are starting to kind of draw away. Spanish missions are being built throughout this area. You can see here La Bahía del Espíritu Santo. And the Karankawas are going to, with these missionaries, are going to establish these trading partnerships and are going to work together. So in a sense, when we get more to the genocide, these missions will become safe havens for the Karankawas, because they've established this kind of relationship with these missions that they go there for a resource eventually in hope to get some protection. So you can see here, this is La Salle arriving and another French explorer arriving here. And you can see here, this is from the perspective of the Karankawas, but then came other whites called the French after the Spanish, right? And, you know, La Salle is saying here, let's use our wrecked ship to build an outpost. And so the narrative continues here, just the same in the graphic novel. And here I just wanted to show you another, so from 1754 to 1830, the Karankawas are actually going to help run some of these missions as well. And they're going to become that link. Spain is very much going to ingrain that connection there between them. So that is a little bit, I know this was pretty detailed, but that is a little bit of the prehistory until we actually get to the genocide itself. And again, here you can see in the graphic novel, the missionaries will working together this is where we hunt, you know, and starting that conversation is to stop the attacks on the missions and the missions not taking away the resources from the Karankawas, and to start that dialogue right here. So let's get to it now. In 1821, not Stephen F. Austin. If you're a Texan, you are very familiar with Stephen F. Austin. You cannot live in Texas and not know Stephen F. Austin. But in 1821, actually Moses Austin, the father of Stephen F. Austin, receives a land grant from the Spanish government to settle this area around the Houston, Galveston area, and to build a colony there. And you can see here several other people get grants as well, but the Austin colony is the first one, and you can see a picture here where the land grant was given, and eventually the other grants that are given here as well. So you can see here on the map the Austin colony just sitting just inland off the shore being. So Moses Austin starts prepping for, starts, you know, building this settlement with the vision that he has for that. Unfortunately, he passes away. And in his will, the colony is left to Stephen F. Austin, which he takes it on with a fury. And at this point, unfortunately, the Mexican Revolution has happened, and unfortunately for Stephen F. Austin, has happened. And now the Mexican government is really the one deciding if Austin has any rights to this land. So Stephen F. Austin travels to Mexico to get this land grant renewed. And he is offered this land grant, and with that, he starts building his vision of what the Austin colony should be. And his vision is really that he wants to create a base of not just the rugged settler, but he wanted to bring some people who would be able to build a strong colony that had you know, were literate, that could read and write, that had some basic business skills, that had some ranching skills. And so he builds his very select group together and then starts moving them to, at this point, the middle of nowhere, Texas. And so this becomes the Old 300s. This will form the first Anglo-Protestant settlers that will come from America and move westward into Texas. Now, these settlers have had contact with American Indian tribes before, not Karankawas, but other tribes. And this fits in with the broader American history, right, is how these settlers will react. And you saw on the cover of our graphic novel, the image that has become very iconic, blended with Manifest Destiny. So this, in a sense, fits in with that larger narrative of westward expansion. And Amy just asked, the line from Nacogdoches towards the southwest that creates a boundary line for the various countries, is there a name for that line? I think that is, I have to look that up. I'm looking at my map here, but I think that is actually a line about a rebellion between and a conflict between the colonies. I'll have to look that up and I'll get back to you. I don't think that's a boundary line. I think that's actually a route right there, the dotted line. Is that what you're, Amy, I'm sure you're talking about this dotted line right here. This dotted line follows the DeWitt colony across the Austin colony and then through the Edwards colony out back in the Louisiana territory. Yeah, I think that's actually a route right there. I'm not sure. I'll have to look that up. Amy asked if that's El Camino Real. I'll have to look that up. Sarah, do you know that by any chance? No, well,
I don't. I've actually been looking because in our area, so between Fort Worth and Dallas, there is something called Old Colony Line Road, and it's a marker. It becomes a major arterial between the two cities, but it's a marker of a colony that was established under permission of President of the Republic of Houston, Republic of Texas, President Sam Houston in 1844. So Amy will look, but I don't know. Okay.
So here you can see in our graphic novel in 1822 is Austin going to have the discussions with Santa Anna on the newly established Republic of Mexico, is to get that land grant. And you can see I'm here meeting with Santa Anna, and then Austin meeting there to get that land grant in the graphic novel. And that really will start to move from between in 1823 and 1824 of the old 300 settling in Texas. And this is actually a picture of one of the families of the old 300 coming over, and part of that land grant as well to form the Austin colony in there. And we have some of those documents on the island in there. Now, you see that I have a lot of quotes, and I want to go back here really quick too, is that there's a lot of quotes, and Stephen F. Austin kept a diary. And so a lot of the information that we have here comes directly from Austin, and some of these patterns that we can see of the 10 stages, we know that those happened because it came from Austin's own words. So I wanted to read this first one yet, is because this already off the bat in 1821 was this reference to the Karankawas. And the Karankawas may be called the universal enemy to man. They killed of all nations that came into power and frequently feast on the bodies of their victims. The approach of an American population would be the signal of their extermination, for there will be no way of subduing them but extermination. And these are strong words. We rarely see in the 1800s, when genocide is occurring, the word extermination being used. So these are very strong words here in reference to it. And the other element that you see here is that cannibalism, right? That came with the French and that stuck, and Austin is really going to use that. whenever a conflict arises with the Karankawas, he's going to depict him as the universal enemy, this ultimate enemy, right? Is these cannibalistic, they need to be wiped out. So this us versus them is very much at the beginning of the base as the Austin colony comes to Texas. So again, here another quote from Austin now in, sorry, that is not 1924, that's 1824. Stephen F. Austin was not around anymore in 1924. The primary product that will elevate us from poverty is cotton. And we cannot do this without the help of slaves. Nothing but foreign commerce, particularly the exportation of cotton to Europe, can enrich the inhabitants of this section. And this is really important because this talks about the philosophy that Austin had about this colony, is what he envisioned to it. This is a farming, a ranching community that will be a strong, it will be a prosperous colony. It will include slavery. That is very much necessary. But with that, it also becomes a development of massive crops, including cotton, which will, of course, take a lot of the territory that the Karankawas are living in. And so you can see that off the bat, if that the way of life, the Karankawas, and the vision of what Austin wants for this colony is going to clash right away off the bat. And skirmishes are going to happen from the very beginning that the Austin colony sets there. And so here you can see in the graphic novel, the old 300 arriving, and their first contact right away is with the Karankawas. But a vile group of heathen Indians called Karankawas ambushed it at every turn. They were worse than the Creeks, right? They've had connection with other American Indian tribes before, and the Karankawas are on this even higher, worse level immediately. So from 1823 to 1854, these clashes continue to happen. And this creates immense difficulty for the settlers and limits their ability to do crops if there are these hostilities. Now, when I'm talking about hostilities, the Karankawas are mainly fighting with a long spear. The settlers are going to be using rifles and knives and different things. So when I talk about these skirmishes, they are weapons-wise really unequal in what is possible. But still, the tension is going to grow. And this helps Houston fuel this dehumanization and that polarization in the community there, that the Karankawas are the enemy, and that if this colony is going to exist, if these settlers are going to survive this harshness of this colony, that the Karankawas have to go. Again, that word extermination is so key in it. And you can hear some of that narrative from Austin as well, to the point that the whole settlement, all the colonizers come together and have these meetings. And this is a famous meeting, actually, famous painting many years later, retroactively looking at this scene where Austin calls his colony, his settlers together and has this big speech in which they unite forces, they create more a plan of how to deal with the Karankawas. And you can see him given a speech right there, Austin in the middle there. And you can see that the planning starts happening even from Austin in 1825. In consequence of the continuous hostilities of the Karankawa Indians and one of their parties having lately shown themselves in the vicinity of some settlements making hostile manifestations, I have been compelled, in view of the security of our people, to give positive orders to the lieutenant of the militia to pursue and kill all those Indians wherever they are found. And this is a radical shift that slowly starts happening, is that this call for extermination, for wiping them all out. Not a single one, this is not just a fight between us and Karankawa warriors. No, every single one must be wiped out. And so this is where, again, in the graphic novel, you can see that as well. And we use that word because Austin uses the word extermination too. We very rarely are able to do that, but to use it this early on is important. So we added that in the graphic novel as well. So I created a little timeline because a lot of events happened since then. So in 1822, the first encounter happens right away between the Austin colony and the Karankawas, and the Karankawas are going to poach supplies. They're already going to steal supplies. They're used to doing that with the Spanish, and they've encountered the French first, so they know how this is working. And first, the Austin colony reacts by this is to attack back. To have an attack is the settlers attack back. Then in 1823, and that's what you saw, right, in the speeches by Austin and in his diary entries, is they start forming a militia. And this militia will be trained, and their focus will be to wipe out the Karankawas, to go out there to hunt them down. And so that is a drastic shift from just this singular attack where the settlers get together and they attack them. No, now a body is created, a militia is created, and they will go out. And so in 1826, they have hunted down the Karankawas, have more, brought them to one focal point where they actually attack them and drive them across the river, where many of the women and children drown. The men are shot down, and this becomes known as the famous Dressing Point Massacre, basically the reference of giving them a good dressing, as teaching them, giving them a good dressing. The remaining Karankawas that survive go to the Spanish missions, to the Franciscans. That's what that 1827 is there. To find a safe haven. So they cannot, this has become so dangerous for them to just live in their own villages or to just move about. It has become so dangerous that they actually move towards those missions and try to have the Franciscans negotiate some kind of peace. This, of course, does not work because the Austin colony is not interested anymore in peace, and they want to literally wipe them all out. And so the militias continue to attack, and slowly the Karankawas are pushed out of Texas towards, well, it is all of Mexico still at this point, but they're pushed southwards away from what is current-day Texas. And the Mexican government starts attacking them too. So they are kind of caught between two people attacking them. On the one side, the Austin colony, and on one side, the Mexican government, who doesn't want them either. Then eventually the Texas Revolution happens, and the few Karankawas that are still left at this point decide to join Mexico's side. And if you know anything about Texas, you know that you probably should not go against Texas if you want to make it through. That really becomes the final stab to the Karankawas, is that after the Texas Revolution, any Karankawa left on the Texas side, when Texas is victorious against Mexico, they will be assassinated. They will be murdered. The Mexican government on its own continues to hunt them down too. And so the result is that within a few years after the Texas Revolution, the last Karankawa camp is attacked, and by 1855, the whole Karankawa tribe has been exterminated. And so this is mainly the vast campaign of that is by the Austin colony, and then later on assisted by the Mexican government as well. So, and then, sorry, I'm going to go through it. I wanted to show you, this is, it is very hard to describe and have a narrative around these genocides that really happened before the concept of genocide even came about, right? The concept of genocide, of how we define it and how we view it, doesn't really come about until more current day. It is a very more modern concept. It is not until post-World War II that we really have it fully coined. So in these instances, we are looking retroactively at this concept and applying, in that sense, the 10 stages to that. It makes it hard to depict in an installation and in a museum, so we will really use some of the descriptions to recreate some of the scene there. And that's what you see is here is the massacre at Dressing Point right here, and it's a beautiful 2-spread page in that graphic novel that is amazingly well drawn to give you a little bit of an insight into what happened. And what you can see here is you can see the Karankawas fleeing across the river here. The Karankawas trying to fight back as much as possible. They making it very difficult. And then that militia keep on driving. By the way, that militia remains in Texas. It is now one of our main law enforcement bodies still today. Anybody have any idea? You're welcome to put in the Q&A if you know what that militia is today. Well, it's not a militia anymore today. It's a law enforcement group. Anybody have any idea what it might be? Yeah, I see some of them coming in. They are the Texas Rangers today. That is the foundation of what will become the Texas Rangers, which is still one of our main law enforcement bodies. Paul asked how many Karankawas were killed in total. We don't know 100% how many Karankawas were killed, but it was probably in the few hundreds that were killed. Now, that is not the numbers that you're probably used to when you think of genocide. But in this case, it is genocide because a whole group is literally, a plan is made to wipe out a whole group. Now, this is a very small minority in this case. And by the way, the Austin colony was also very small. It's not like Texas was inhabited by millions of people as it is today. But this is very total, and in that sense, looking at that. Margaret first asked if the Karankawas, when the Karankawas joined the Mexicans, if there are any surviving groups from there. No, because the Mexican government uses them during the Texas Revolution to fight against the Texan settlers. By the way, if you know anything about the Texas Revolution is mainly fought in the area where the Karankawas are originally from. They are not living at that point in this area anymore, but the Mexican government used their knowledge of the land to have them join their armies and to give advice and be scouts in a sense. No, so the Karankawas hope that this is joining the Mexican government against the Texas Revolution is their chance to get their land back and their homes back, and that is not the case. And when Mexico loses, they turn back on the Karankawas as well. So after the Texas Revolution, the Karankawas, literally the few who are remaining, I'm talking about very, very few at this point. They're very tiny little pockets of 10 people here, 10 people there, are fully wiped out. If they remain behind in Texas itself after the Texas Revolutions, they're executed. And then the Mexican government will keep pushing them out, will basically keep pushing them back into Texas. Will regularly hunt down these tiny little groups of Karankawas. And then once they cross the border into Texas, they are killed by Texans on the other side. Ellen asked, according to the 10 stages, would any other attacks on American Indian tribes be considered genocide? I want to be very careful on that. An attack on an American Indian tribe is not necessarily a genocide. For example, the French attacked the Karankawas as well, but there was no systematic plan to wipe them out. There was no long-term plan in that sense. So we can't really, what the French did to the Karankawas in a sense called genocide. What the Austin colony did is put a systematic plan in place, and that plan had the intent to wipe out every single Karankawa. And then we can put the 10 stages on there and see that systematically that genocide happened. That is, it really depends on what American Indian tribe you look at. There are some other tribes in Texas where you could probably put that pattern on as well. Again, I am not an American Indian historian, so I can't help you on that. There are also, I do know that there are some tribes in California where also systematic plans for full extermination happened as well. That we can lay this on. Harold asked, I assume there were children, although none are depicted. Harold, they are actually depicted too. I don't know if you can see it on my screen. On the very, here you can see the Karankawan mom right here saying, oh no, my baby, right here, oh my baby, and then you can see the baby and the child right there. It's on the very bottom. I'm not sure if my screen is cutting it off. Let me see if I can zoom in on it a little bit. Right here, yeah, it gets kind of blurry if I zoom in. So yeah, the graphic novel, but absolutely yes. This was really targeted to fully wipe out all Karankawas, young, old, mother, child, all of it. It's a full-blown genocide at that point. Pam asked, the use of smallpox was to wipe out many different tribes. No, that is, Sarah, do you want to address that really quick?
Yeah, so Pam, that's part of the mythology of the treatment and the treatment is horrible of the various American Indian groups. We do know, at least mythologically, that Lord Amherst during the French and Indian War, he was British, gave blankets that in theory had been infected with smallpox to Indians who were allied with the French as opposed to allied with the British. Subsequent epidemiological studies have indicated that, in fact, even if that were true, you cannot catch smallpox from those blankets. So then the question is intention versus consequences. But that particular charge has been leveled quite frequently, and historians have gone back, and many of them have said it simply has no basis in truth. I would put it in the same area that I put the news that the Karankawa were cannibals. In other words, both sides level these kinds of charges that we don't necessarily have any proof for.
The other thing that I want to highlight is because sometimes we do get the question, for example, the Trail of Tears is brought up quite frequently. And I always say this is why the 10 stages of genocide are so great, because you don't really necessarily need to look at a historical event and have to put that label of genocide on it. You can still study it and see those 10 stages and see how human beings treat other human beings, and through persecution and polarization and all of these other stages. It might have never led to a genocide. That doesn't mean that it might have been on the path towards genocide. So I think the 10 stages is a really great way to look at different American Indian tribes and nations and what happened to them, and to learn about that. Amy asked, what's the difference between a genocide and a genocidal event? That is really good. The genocidal event is usually, like in this point, this slide that I have up right now is a genocidal event, is dressing point, is that immediate, right there, the act itself happening. And usually with genocide, we reference to from the beginning to the end, it's the whole process, right? That includes the denial and everything, which I'm about to talk as well. And the genocidal event is that very, is usually the extermination stage that we discuss within the 10 stages, is the actual event right there. So when we talk about, let me actually do kind of lay it out on the Holocaust, because sometimes that's easier. The Holocaust is that whole time period. You can even say before 1933, but definitely 1933 to 1945. But the actual final solution, that extermination phase, Auschwitz does not exist in 33, but still we put the genocide as the broader thing, but that really 41 to 45, that phase is that when the genocidal event really is happening, and the Einsatzgruppen and those things. So kind of given that question. Melvina asked, I would request a session on the 10 stages of genocide this summer. We can definitely slot to do that again. It's a very popular one. We did it at the beginning, and I'm going to ask our programs folks to see if that is up or slotted to be up on our website, on our YouTube channel as well. And if not, I can get y'all the link to that so you can watch that. So I'll check that if that's available as well. So today, What does that leave us? Part of the 10 stages of genocide is a very key stage, which I think is probably one of the most important to look at, is denial. Denial happens and starts during genocide, usually by saying, oh, this is just part of war, right? This is just skirmishes between the Karankawas and us, and we're just defending us, right? As in a sense, denying what you're doing. And so denial starts, but it continues usually way longer after the genocide as well, and is usually a key marker that a genocide has happened. This is actually an essay that is part of an essay of the description of what a student was asked on a state test about describing American Indians in Texas. This is what that student wrote. Karankawas are cannibals. They eat their enemies by tying them to the stake, and when they dance around the stake, then they dart and slice a piece of flesh and eat it. That is because up until the mid-1990s, most books provided in the state of Texas to students and how it was taught in the curriculum was that the Karankawas were cannibals and that they hunted down the Austin colony and that Austin bravely defended himself. And this is a form of how denial has continued, is to use that dehumanization, is to say, right, they were evil, that if we didn't do it, they were gonna get us. And this is a great example how in Texas culture, this denial has so existed. We talked to so many people at the museum who remember when they were young and they went to school in Texas learning about the Karankawas as being cannibals. And they never realized that they were fish-eating, oyster-eating folks that rarely eat even red meat. This changed. The TAA actually changed that and actively tries to push that out of all narrative. Textbooks have changed, and to make sure that that narrative doesn't continue. But still, a lot of work has been done. Basically, Texans since the Austin colony up until I believe it's 94 have been taught that Karankawas are evil and cannibals. And that pattern of the 10 stages has continued. So there's still a lot of work, and our museum is trying to make one step towards that. Paul asked, when was this essay written? It was, this is one from the state test in '87.
I would also point out our museum head, Mary Pat Higgins, was educated in Texas. And the first time we went through this with her and walked through the section of the exhibit, she said to us, and I quote, "Wait, I remember them. They were the cannibals." And we said, "No, they weren't." And she had a standard public school education. So we reached another Texan, so that's a good thing. But it was very funny, not funny, haha, funny, odd, because it fit with what we knew, which is that this was part of the, this was definitely part of a standard public school education in Texas. She went to school in the greater Austin area, so whatever the Austin ISD was down there. Also, one other thing, and then I'm sorry for interrupting, Charlotte. Our programmer, Annie Black, would like everybody to know that the 10 stages of genocide talk that Dr. DeCoster gave earlier this year is available on our YouTube channel, which you can search by going to youtube.com and putting in DHHRM, the initials of the museum, and then you can pull that up. So you can watch that.
And it should show all the videos in here. Right here is that presentation. If you missed that, you can watch it here, the comfort of your home. So of all the graphic novels, I have a lot of favorites in the graphic novels because, you know, it is a very unique way to get this story across. And some of the emotions that come with these narratives of genocide. And I think this is one of the final drawings in the graphic novel called Our Land on the Karankawas. And you know, you can see the young Karankawa girl is talking about when we then retreated further into Mexico, mixing among other tribes until no Karankawas, the Karankawas were no more. So that is kind of the final message there is full elimination. Now, I know a lot of you probably don't know, want to know more about this now that you've gotten a little taste on this very unique part of Texas history. And so I wanted to leave some resources with you. There's not a lot of books out there on the Karankawas. It's still a much understudied topic. So if you're a university student and you're in history and you want to look at something, this is a topic available. But there's 2 books out there on the Karankawa Indians of Texas by Robert Rickless. It's a little older. And then The Conquest of the Karankawas and Tonkawas by Kelly Himmel. The other one is there's a great article on the Texas Handbook Online, and you can just Google Texas Handbook Online, and there you can find that article on the Karankawas as well and get some more information. And then there's a great from University of Texas, Austin. They have a great article on called The Struggle for Borderlands that again talks about the different colonies, Anglo-Protestant colonies settling Texas and the conflicts that we had, not just with the Karankawas, but other tribes as well, such as the Tonkawa, the Apache, the Wichita, the Caddo, different tribes in there as well. So are there any questions? I can maybe for 1-2 minutes take some more questions. I know this is, okay. Our next week again, we have many amazing films in the exhibition, and probably a very powerful one that when we are creating it, I have seen so much film footage from the rise of Nazism that I even watched when our teams were putting this together, and I said, wow, I've never seen that film footage that is incorporated in there. So it's our film that is from our Nazi Germany gallery called The Rise of Nazism. We will be showing that film next week, and then we will actually do a discussion afterwards, and that you can participate as well. We have a wealth of other programs coming up as well, so make sure to check out our programs and events page. You have the link right there. We have our virtual book clubs. We have a talk on Thursday on rescuers during the Holocaust, during our Understanding Holocaust History series. So there's many other different opportunities. So I hope you join us for that as well. And thank you for your amazing questions today and joining us. Have a wonderful afternoon.